A baseball stadium has 1,000 cameras pointed in 1,000 directions at any given moment. Most of the time, that redundancy goes unnoticed. Broadcasts pick one or two primary angles, the highlight package gets assembled from the cleanest version of the moment, and the rest of the footage simply exists somewhere in an archive, unwatched, uncommented on, eventually forgotten. This was not one of those times. Because in the seconds after Shohei Ohtani's 18th home run of the season left the bat, 4 separate cameras happened to be pointed at 4 separate teammates. Not by design. Not because any broadcast producer had anticipated that this particular swing would be worth this particular level of documentation. It simply happened that way. The kind of accidental archival luck that occasionally produces the most honest footage in all of sports. Yoshinobu Yamamoto. Teoscar Hernandez. Kim. Freeman. 4 players. 4 cameras. 4 reactions that, once American media outlets began circulating them side by side in the hours following the game, revealed something almost unsettling in how differently 4 professional athletes could process the exact same swing in the exact same instant. None of them looked the same. And once people started watching them in sequence, nobody could stop. The footage began circulating almost immediately after the game ended, pulled from broadcast feeds and stadium camera systems by analysts who had noticed something in real time and gone back to confirm it frame by frame. What they found was a kind of split-screen study in how elite athletes, people who have built entire careers on controlling their outward reactions in high-pressure moments, can be reduced to 4 completely distinct, completely unguarded responses by witnessing the same swing from 4 different vantage points. The home run itself needs little additional description at this point. The count was full. The pitch was a breaking ball that should have been nearly impossible to do major damage against. Ohtani's swing connected with a sound that multiple people in the ballpark would later separately describe in nearly identical terms. The ball left the yard at a velocity and a distance that immediately registered as one of the most significant individual swings of the entire season. What happened next, in the 4 to 5 seconds immediately following contact, became its own story entirely. Yamamoto was in the dugout, seated near the rail, in the position pitchers often occupy when they are not scheduled to throw that day but remain fully locked into the game regardless. The camera caught him at the exact moment of contact. His reaction was the most physically subdued of the 4, but subdued in a way that somehow communicated more than an outward display might have. His eyes widened first. Then his head turned, very slightly, toward the teammates seated beside him, a kind of instinctive seeking of shared confirmation that what he had just witnessed was real and not some trick of perception. He did not say anything that the broadcast microphones picked up clearly. But his mouth moved. Something brief. Something that lip readers who later analyzed the clip suggested looked like a short exhale of disbelief rather than an actual word. What made Yamamoto's reaction resonate so strongly with viewers was the specific professional context he occupies. As a pitcher, his entire career has been built around understanding exactly how difficult it is to do what Ohtani had just done. He has stood on a mound and tried to get hitters out using the exact kind of pitch that had just been hit 400 and some feet. His reaction was not the generic excitement of a fan. It was the very specific, very informed disbelief of someone who understands precisely how impossible that swing should have been. Teoscar Hernandez was on the field, in the on-deck circle, preparing for his own at-bat that would follow immediately after Ohtani's. His reaction was the most physically expressive of the 4. The camera caught him taking an actual step backward, away from home plate, as if some part of his body needed additional physical distance to fully process what he had just watched. His free hand came up and pressed briefly against the side of his helmet. His mouth opened into something between a laugh and an expression of pure disbelief, the kind of unguarded reaction that happens when a person's instinctive response overrides whatever professional composure they might typically maintain. He would later be asked directly about that moment during his own post-game availability. "I don't even remember doing that, if I'm honest. I saw the replay later and I was like, did I really step back like that? But yeah. That's exactly how it felt in the moment." Like I needed to take a step back just to fully take in what had happened. A reporter asked whether watching that swing from such close proximity had affected his own at-bat that immediately followed. Hernandez laughed. 100%. I'm standing there about to hit, and all I can think about is what I just saw. That's a hard reset mentally. I had to take a second before I could even think about my own approach. Kim's reaction, captured from a camera positioned near the infield, was perhaps the most quietly devastating of the four. He was not reacting with his body the way Hernandez had. He was reacting with stillness. Complete, total stillness, the kind that sometimes communicates more than movement ever could. His expression, frozen for nearly 2 full seconds in the footage, showed something that several analysts described as a kind of resigned amazement. Not the disbelief of someone witnessing something unexpected. The quiet acceptance of someone witnessing something that, on some level, he had stopped being surprised by, even though the specific magnitude of this particular swing still managed to stop him in his tracks. When asked about it afterward, Kim offered a brief but telling response. I've played with him long enough that I shouldn't be surprised anymore. But I still am. Every time. I think that's just what it is to be his teammate. You expect the impossible from him, and somehow he still finds new ways to make the impossible look small. That phrase, make the impossible look small, was picked up by several outlets in the hours following the game, becoming something close to the unofficial caption for the entire collection of reactions. Freeman's reaction was, in many ways, the most layered of the four, carrying with it the specific weight of someone who has played the game at the highest level for the longest period of time among this particular group. The camera caught him in the dugout, arms crossed, watching the flight of the ball with an expression that shifted noticeably across the several seconds it remained in the air. Initial widened eyes. Then something that looked almost like a smile breaking through, not the broad expression of pure excitement but something quieter, something closer to genuine appreciation. He shook his head slowly. Not in disbelief exactly. In something closer to acknowledgement. The specific head shake of a veteran who has seen enough baseball across enough seasons to recognize exactly how rare what he had just witnessed actually was. When reporters asked him about the moment afterward, Freeman's answer carried the perspective that only someone with his experience could offer. I've played a long time. I've played with a lot of great players. I have genuinely never seen anything like what that man does on a baseball field. And I think what got me in that moment wasn't just the home run itself. It was remembering, again, that I get to watch this every single day. That doesn't get old. I hope it never gets old. A reporter asked him to characterize, specifically, what had been different about his own reaction compared to earlier in the season, when Ohtani had hit similarly significant home runs. Freeman considered the question for a moment. Every single one feels different somehow. You'd think it would start to blend together. It doesn't. Each one has its own moment. Tonight's moment was its own thing entirely. What made the side-by-side footage circulate so widely across American sports media was not simply that 4 reactions had been captured. It was the specific contrast between them. For professional athletes, each with their own relationship to the game, their own specific vantage point, their own history with Ohtani as a teammate, processing the identical 4 seconds in 4 entirely distinct ways. Yamamoto's quiet, technically informed disbelief. Hernandez's full-body, almost involuntary physical reaction. Kim's frozen, resigned amazement. Freeman's layered, experience-weighted appreciation. One broadcast analyst, reviewing the compiled footage during a national segment, offered what became one of the more widely quoted observations of the following day. You almost never get this kind of unguarded documentation of how differently elite athletes experience the same moment. That's the real story here. Not just the home run. It's that we got to see 4 completely honest reactions to it, captured by accident, and none of them needed to perform anything. That's rare. Ohtani, when eventually asked about the circulating footage of his teammates' reactions, responded with the same characteristic restraint that defines nearly every public moment of his career. "I haven't watched all of those clips closely. But I'm glad my teammates were excited. That means something to me. More than people probably realize." A reporter pressed further, asking whether he found it meaningful that the reactions had been so genuinely different from each other, rather than a uniform display of excitement. Ohtani considered the question with the kind of thoughtfulness that has become a hallmark of how he engages with questions that move beyond the standard post-game format. "I think that's baseball. Everybody experiences the same moment differently. I think that's actually one of the best parts of this game. We all watched the same swing. We all felt something different. That's what makes a team, I think. Not everyone reacting the same way. Everyone reacting honestly." By the following day, the 4-camera compilation had become one of the most discussed pieces of secondary footage from the entire season, circulated and recirculated across platforms, broken down by analysts, and discussed at length on national broadcasts that typically reserve that level of attention for the primary highlight itself rather than the reactions surrounding it. What it ultimately revealed was something that statistics alone could never fully capture. The specific, individual, deeply human impact that witnessing genuine greatness up close can have on the people standing closest to it. For players. For completely different processing systems. One single swing, powerful enough to briefly strip away the practiced composure of every single one of them. Kim had said it best, even if he hadn't intended his words to become the defining quote of the entire moment. You expect the impossible from him. And somehow he still finds new ways to make the impossible look small. The cameras had simply been there to prove it.